Alright, so today I wanted to go over the Rapier bleed build and whether or not it stands the hype around it. So first off, I'll say that the bleed build is good on damage. It is very strong for damage, and it is just up there with the Repost build. However, there are a few things that I do want to mention with the bleed build, and we'll start off with the fact that it does suffer quite a bit when it comes to big clumps of enemies. So the problem with the bleed build is that in order for it to really shine, you need to stack tondos and stack bleeds. And you're essentially investing lower DPS value with tondo by stacking bleeds in order for it to pay off by using a flourish and finish. Now, with low health enemies, this can be tough because you're not really going to be able to get as many tondos off before the enemy just dies. So with bosses, it can be good, but it also requires you to have a strong tank. Now the reasoning is when using something like the Repost build, if you have aggro, it's not a big deal because you can just riposte and evade. I mean, you have two pretty good get out of jail free cards with that. But with the bleed build, if you have aggro, you're going to have to solely rely on dodges and maybe using flourish and finish grit as an option as well. Very rare circumstances, but still, that is an option. But the issue is that with a Rapier, you really want to stay at 100% health because you'll get a 10% damage buff by staying at 100% health. So if you take any damage, that's going to lower your overall DPS, and that's obviously not a good thing that you want to go for. So that is why having a strong tank is pretty important. Unless you plan on tanking, then obviously you want to use the Rapier Repost if you're solely a tank with the Rapier. But I'm purely talking from a DPS standpoint here. But yeah, so the Repost build is very, very strong when it comes to your ability to stay in fights and also just not take damage. And that is a very, very big deal. Now, I used this bleed build yesterday for about, I want to say 3 hours or so, just really trying to get a feel for it. And I did invest something like 70k gold into a very good Rapier for the bleed build. And I'll put that on screen at the end of the video, but I still want to say that the bleed build is not a bad build. It is still very strong for PvE. Now, for PvP, I don't really have any experience with that, but I can imagine that it is very strong in PvP specifically. But when it comes to PvE, it is good, but I don't think it is as good as the Repost build. The reason is, well, there's a few reasons, but I think the primary big reason is that you have to position yourself perfectly with the bleed build. Same as the Repost build, but with the bleed build, you cannot be in a bad position at all at any time because, you know, if you're in a bad position and you have to reposition, you can't just use an evade to reposition yourself. You're going to have to use a dodge or just, walk away, move away, and that's going to lower your DPS. So with the Repost build, if you have to reposition, you can just evade or riposte into an evade cancel. It's a lot more free flow with the Repost build than it is with the bleed build. Both are strong damage, don't get me wrong, and the bleed build is definitely one of the strongest potential damage weapons in the game. But the only issue is that you have to play perfectly with it. And anyone who wants to attempt to use this build, the bleed build, it requires a lot of skill to do it. And if you play it perfectly, you have my respect, but it is a very, very difficult build to play perfectly. And even in a perfect world, I still think it requires a ton of luck to get the amount of DPS that you would normally get just from flat out using the evade build, or I guess Repost build. So that's kind of my main issue with the bleed build, is that it's a lot of, just kind of luck in the way that you have to position yourself. So right now you can see this is the Nishitin fight, and I'll be honest, I tried to pick two runs that were relatively even, but with the Repost build run, we had a really good healer which was able to put Oblivion down when needed. So we were able to get away with just no orb phase for both of these. So that was a very, very good, huge damage burst that we were able to do. With the bleed build though, it's probably still possible to get that type of burst damage, but it definitely requires you to have, good group composition, people who put down Oblivions, same as the Repost build, obviously, but that's kind of why I like the Repost build so much, is that you're able to kind of be a lone wolf in a sort of way, and you don't really have to rely too much on your teammates because you're able to solo pretty much everything. I don't think there's anything in the game that you can't solo. Maybe commanders you can't solo with Repost build, but I need more experience with that personally. I think it's probably doable. You just, you can't make any mistakes, and you have to hope that the attack patterns are good. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. I'll put on screen right now both weapons that I used for both of these builds. And I guess my final thoughts is that the Repost build is very, very underrated, and it is probably the best build in the game for specifically corrupted enemies, and more specifically Tempest. This is kind of my where my most experience is, and that's why I'm choosing to show gameplay of Tempest, because I have a good idea of what is good damage in this dungeon, so I can get a better estimate of the damage by using these runs. So I guess with that said, I'll show the weapons and I'll let you make up your own mind, but I will say from my own experience and my own judgment, I still prefer that the Rapier Repost build is the way to go. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you.